Well, first, thank you for being all with us. We'll request to have the micro off and to comment, writing on the chat. Also, you can write questions that we hold in a conversation afterwards with Denise. When the meeting is finished at 40 minutes, we can reconnect with the same link. Well, I would like to present briefly. My name is Adriana. I am the founder of Animana and Hecho por Nosotros. Animana is a B Corp that works with artisans, natural fibers, camelids from the Andes, llamas, guanacos, vicuñas, and alpacas, and with artisans. And we work hardly on making capacity building, design, and taking on these treasures to the market. And with the NGO Hecho por Nosotros, hundreds of academics, professionals in sustainability, designers, and change makers around the world, we are working together in collaborating for a systemic change in fashion through understanding local problems at the small, medium firms at the base of the value chain, and gathering these problems with professionals, designers, institutions around the world. At UN, we have the ECOSOC Status Consultative, which allows, and it is an open space that I invite all that are present today to use this space in order to give a voice and together collaborate for a system change in fashion. Today we have an honor. We have a guest, Denise De Luca, and I would like Denise to have your voice, present yourself, begin sharing all these interesting principles and knowledge you have, and we will learn a lot with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Adriana. And I really want to thank all of you for listening to this, whether it's live or a later recording, because it means you're devoted to sustainability and sustainable design and trying to make change in the world, and you're curious, and we desperately need more people like you doing this sort of thing. So thank you for being here to learn together. So my name is Denise De Luca, and currently I'm the director of the Master of Art in Sustainable Design program at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. It's a fully online program, so I actually live in Missoula, Montana, even though the program is out of Minneapolis. I think some of our students are in the webinar here today. So today what I want to talk about is a sustainable design methodology called biomimicry. So I want to just cover the what, why, and how of biomimicry, or designing from nature. Sometimes you hear about it called innovation inspired by nature. So I've got a long history in biomimicry, so any questions you've got, I'd love to answer them at the end. So if biomimicry is innovation inspired by nature or designing from nature, the first question that comes to mind is, why design from nature? We're so smart, right? We're so clever. We've developed machines and computers and airplanes. Why do we look to nature for design? Well, one reason is evidenced in this picture, that when we design things and we manufacture things and we distribute things, it requires a reliance on pumping petroleum from the ground and mining and manufacturing that looks like this. It requires energy and toxic chemicals, and it spews out air pollution and water pollution, and it destroys the earth, and then we have to live in this environment that we've destroyed. And when we make things, even when we're very successful, often what we make ends up in the landfill or the incinerator. And with clothing, the sad thing is a lot of clothing that's made never even gets worn by the consumer. It goes directly to landfill. It is a crying shame, but that is how our system is set up. And it's not just the environment. When we design and make things, we exploit the environment, and that causes conflicts and wars around the world. So we've got people in war-torn countries and refugees, and that is often the case of using more resources than are available. So we exploit somewhere else and somebody else. And it's not just the difficult parts of the world. In the developed world, among the very wealthy, you can see these children have everything. They have everything they want. Everything seems wonderful. They're living in riches, except you can see that they're poor in their relationships with other human beings, and they're poor in their relationships with nature. So our economic and social systems are not generating citizens and humans. We're generating more consumers that demand more of this exploitation of Earth and other people. So how do we get out of this mess? How do we get out of this system that we've created, this kind of this monster that we've created? Because we love our things. I mean, like with fashion, we love what we produce. Well, if you think about what we're trying to achieve with fashion, you know, beauty or protection or, you know, color or waterproofing, whatever function that you're trying to achieve with design and fashion, nature has already accomplished those functions, and it has done it in a beautiful and sustainable way. And if you want to find out how to do that, all you have to do is ask. You have to ask nature, how do you solve these design challenges? And that's what biomimicry is all about. It's about asking how nature solves design challenges and how can we take those solutions and apply them to our designs. So what is biomimicry? Well, if you've heard of the term before, you may have read this book or seen this woman give a TED Talk, Janine Benyus. She coined the term biomimicry, so she came up with that term, but her book is actually a story about people who've been practicing something, you know, innovations inspired by nature. It could be architects, engineers, scientists, inventors, and she put this together in this wonderful book. So you get a chance to read that. I encourage you to do so. Even if you haven't heard the term biomimicry, you've seen the results. So all of you, I'm sure, know what Velcro is. You know, it's got that hook and loop structure that allows for a dry, reusable adhesive. Well, that was inspired by the burr, how burrs stick to the fur of animals. If you've got a dog and you've taken them outside, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And we're all familiar with cardboard and that wiggly structure in between. Well, that wiggly structure or corrugation is to help increase strength without and resistance to bending without increasing much weight. And that was inspired by the corrugation that we see in nature, like in this shell here. And of course, anyone interested in sustainability knows about renewable energy, solar energy. And solar panels take energy from the sun, which is free and abundant, and then converts it into a form of energy that we can use. And of course, that's inspired by leaves and photosynthesis and all the greenery on Earth. So even if you haven't heard the term biomimicry, you've seen it in action. So the next question is how? How do we design from nature? Well, the simple way of designing from nature is you can go out in nature and you discover things. You discover nature's strategies. So how nature does things. And this bird, you might say, wow, that's a really interesting beak. What is that for? And it turns out that beak allows this kingfisher to dive into water without making a splash so it doesn't scare the fish away. So you can discover a strategy in nature and then figure out its function. Or you can start with function. So you want to design something. You want your design to do something or perform a function. And then you could say, go out in nature and discover nature's strategies for performing that function. And either way you dive into it, you can use these strategies for performing functions and turn those into sustainable and innovative design solutions. So I keep using the word strategy. So a strategy is how a function is performed. So when we perform strategies, we often use toxic chemicals, say to make something waterproof, or we add a lot of materials, or we add a lot of energy. Well, nature's strategies include materials. So the material itself, the way it's constructed, that material performs a function. Sometimes it's something as simple as a shape, like the spiral shape you see in nature performs all kinds of functions. It might be the shape of the whole thing, it might be the shape of a surface. It might be a process. So there could be a whole sequence of things that happens that, that allow this function to occur. Often it's relationships. So nature is systems-based, and things rely on each other to perform functions. And when you put it all together, as I just mentioned, systems. Often when nature designs things, that thing doesn't perform the function, the system performs a function for it, which is what we would call smart design. So those are strategies. What's the big idea behind these strategies? So you got these strategies performing functions, but why is that particularly sustainable? Well, the big idea is that everything on Earth lives on Earth, okay? And we can see from this picture how limited Earth really is. And us humans, we can only live on the surface. We can't live out in space, we can't live in the water, so we live just on this thin crust of where there's land on Earth. Every other living thing says, okay, that's what we have. We're gonna live within the constraints and conditions of Earth. And those basic conditions are that things on Earth are constantly changing. There's day and night, and there's seasons. You can see from this picture, like the weather, things are swirling around, and we don't know what the weather's gonna be day after day. So life on Earth has to accommodate that things are constantly changing. And the other big condition is that there are limits and boundaries. Even the amount of sun hitting the Earth is limited. Every other living thing on Earth say, yep, I got it, I can live with that. But humans are always trying to go beyond the limits and boundaries of Earth. And so to live with those conditions, life for all living things, whether it's an individual organism, a species, or all life collectively, has these principles that they live by in order to thrive and survive given the conditions on Earth. And there are two basic principles. One is that life adapts and evolves. So things change, no problem. Life has learned to adapt in the short term and evolve in the long term. And the other is that life creates conditions conducive to other life. So whatever one organism does, whether it makes things or goes about its life, reproducing or transporting or traveling, whatever it's doing, in the process of doing what it does, it creates conditions conducive to other life. So by contrast, when we make things, I showed you in that picture earlier, we don't care if other things can't survive, because as long as we get what we want. So there's more detailed levels to this. So in order to adapt and evolve, life or living things is locally attuned and responsive. So every organism pays attention to what's going on around it and responds accordingly. It also runs on cyclic processes because the Earth itself cycles and recycles, whether it's in one day or in a year. So life is designed to run on cyclic processes too. And there's other reasons for that, so like, for example, the birth, life, death cycle every time allows adaptations to occur. Also, life is designed to be resilient. So instead of like resisting change, it's just from change and sometimes thrive because of that change. And to create conditions conducive to life, living things tend to optimize instead of trying to maximize or minimize, which is what humans tend to like to do. It's also interconnected and interdependent. So all living things, including humans, are connected to all other living things and often leverage the fact that, oh, something else can do something for me instead of my having to do it myself. And then when living things make things, they do things safely. So whatever they make, it doesn't hurt the environment and often contributes to the environment. And the big idea behind this is that if you can take life's principles and make them into your design principles, then your designs will be appropriate for conditions present on the earth. They will be sustainable designs. So your goal is to say, my designs adapt and evolve. My design is locally attuned and responsive, or my design creates conditions conducive to life. My design optimizes rather than maximizes. So that's a big idea behind the life's principles and how you can make them your design principles. So how has biomimicry been used in the fashion industry? Well, one of the things that you want to do in fashion is you want to create, beauty, you want to create color, but you also want practical things. Things like, for example, you may want something to be waterproof or stain resistant in addition to being colorful. And when we try and achieve these functions, our strategies leave the earth looking like this. So this is a river in Bangladesh near one of the factories that produces dyes. We leave this toxic waste behind it. And of course, the workers that are working in those factories are experiencing these same toxins. So when we try to design things to perform functions, we rely on stuff like this. But our friend here that we saw a few slides ago, this bird is waterproof. It's stain resistant and it's colorful, and clearly it lives in harmony with nature. So what the heck? What can we learn? What strategies does this bird use to accomplish its functions and do so in a very wonderfully sustainable way? Well, we've all seen this after a rainstorm, right? You see a leaf and some of them appear to be completely dry with water beating up in the middle. And the classic is the lotus leaf. And some people call it the lotus effect, that this water beads up and then can roll right off the leaf. Well, in our minds, if we want to make something waterproof, we try and seal it off, make it smooth so water can shed off of it. We also think about that if we want something fast, we want to make it smooth. But nature says, actually, if you play with the surface a little bit, you can achieve functions just by shape. So on the left here, you can see that's how water normally sits on a surface. It spreads out and it soaks in. That's how things get wet. But if you can see that, let me see if can you see my cursor here? That bumpy surface on the lotus leaf, and it's on other other organisms too, it causes the water to bead up in this ball. And so it never really touches the surface and wets it. It beads up like that and rolls around, and it can collect up dirt with it. And so it rolls off and leaves, in this case, the leaf clean and dry without any, obviously no toxic chemicals. So one company, Schoeller NanoSphere, has developed a fabric that has emulated this surface structure on the surface of the material. So you can pour water on it and it dries right off. You can pour honey or oil on it and same thing, it rolls right off. So by emulating just the surface shape, you can create a waterproof and stain resistant surface without even having to use any soap. And now about the color. So this is a morpho butterfly, and there's almost like nothing more colorful than this butterfly on Earth, especially when you see it in its home of the rainforest. The colors are just stunning. And the morpho butterfly is also big, so it's just like magic to see one of those fly around. And it's not only this gorgeous blue, but it's also iridescent. It's like what we'd love to be able to create colors like that in nature. But again, I mean, in our designs, but unfortunately to do that, we use really toxic chemicals. But nature, when it wants to create colors, it doesn't actually use, sometimes it does, but in this case, it's not using pigments. The butterfly and things like a peacock, they're actually brown. That is the color that they are. The reason we see the color is because in this case, on the butterfly wing, there are these little scales. If you ever looked up close, you can see that. And the scales are maybe these little cuticles. And on the cuticles, you've got this surface structure that when light hits it, it's refracted or reflected off in a way that makes a color to our eye, just like the rainbow does. There's no pigment in a rainbow. It's all about reflecting and refracting light. So you get these amazing colors. And just by shifting the spacing there, you can create different and incredibly vibrant colors. And again, when you use it, there's no chipping, there's no peeling, there's no fading, and of course, there's no toxins. One group has leveraged this to make the Morphotex dress. And the cool thing is, once you start to play with these things, you go, not only can I make color, but I can make color that changes as you move. And other people have played with making fabric that changes with heat and humidity, so you can make like a mood fabric. So those are just a couple of examples of materials that have leveraged biomimicry, but you can also emulate nature at the organizational level. So it's not just what you make, it's the organization or the company itself can leverage strategies from nature. One example is called the ABLE project, sometimes called Cardboard to Caviar. It's in the United Kingdom, and it actually was founded as a social enterprise. There was this person wanted to make an opportunity for recovering heroin addicts to connect with nature, and they started working with horses, and they realized, wow, horse manure is kind of messy. So what they did is they would take waste cardboard, in that case it wasn't being recycled, they break it up into small pieces and use it for horse bedding. And once it was soiled, they would compost it, and that compost would support worms, and those worms, they would feed to sturgeon fish, and those fish would make caviar. So they would take a waste product, cardboard, and turn it into caviar, a high value food. But they realized, just like an ecosystem, you don't have to stop there. They realized actually they can use other things like waste bread to make food, or make larvae to feed the fish, and they can use the waste from the fish to make fertilizer to grow crops, which can feed the workers, and make other food that can be sold along with the caviar. And they could realize, just like an ecosystem and biodiversity, each thing makes opportunities for other things. So you get this beautiful business based on principles from nature. So going back to those principles we talked about, you can see how it can adapt and evolve with every new opportunity. It's very much locally attuned and responsive, saying what's locally available, how can we use this? And if it changes, oh, we can change because we've got this cool system going. Clearly it runs on cyclic processes. It's resilient because, well, if one thing is more of one thing or another, it's like, okay, we can accommodate that. We can compost more here. We can use more food waste instead of fish. It's always optimizing across the system rather than trying to make the most of something. It tries to make many different things. And so it's the optimization, you can see, leads to resilience. Clearly it's interconnected and interdependent. And of course it's making things safely. And of course it's a social enterprise to boot. Another example is called Hello Tractor. This is in Africa. And people have long realized that if you could use a tractor on agricultural fields, you can get much more productivity out of the land. But most people can't afford a tractor. And even if they could, that tractor sits there most of the time, not being used. So it's a waste of all this capital expenditure to have this thing sitting there most of the time. So this group came up with this app on a phone called Hello Tractor, and it's basically an Uber for tractors. So anyone in the region can call up and say, hey, can you bring your tractor over here and plow my field? So each farmer gets the benefit of having the service of a tractor without having to own one, and the person owning the tractor can make better use of it. So it's enriching the economy all around based on this systems model. And now that they have an app, people are using that to share information, lessons learned on each of their farms, how to optimize their farming practices. So it's a sharing platform, not just for tractors, but also for ideas. So again, you can see how this as an organization is locally attuned and responsive and runs on cyclic processes, and it optimizes, and it's interconnected and interdependent. So you can have your business model based on strategies from nature too. One that some of you may have heard of if you're in the fashion industry is Soul Rebels. It's out of Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. So this woman who grew up there she spent a lot of time with her grandmother, and her grandmother, like so many other craftsmen, knew how to make shoes. They would make them, I forget the name of it. There's a shoe that's made out of waste tires. That's the sole of it. And she could see they had all these craftsmen here, but most of the employment was from big external firms exploiting local workers and then taking the materials away. So she said, that's terrible. Why don't we do it here? So she created this group, Soul Rebels, where she helps local artisans take the crafts that they already have, using the waste tires, other recycled materials. So they take local materials, recycled materials, sustainable materials, and then she's created this business where each one can use their own artistry and craft to create unique, one-of-a-kind shoes, and then she helps sell them worldwide. So it's local, it's sustainable, it's a social enterprise, and it's just a really neat thing. So again, you can see how an organization can build this business model based on life's principles. Okay, so again, how do we do this? How do we design from nature? I gave you the basic idea that you can either discover strategies from nature and then figure out what functions they're performing, or you can identify functions that you want to perform in your design and figure out strategies that nature uses, and then use those things to generate innovative and sustainable design solutions. So that's the basic idea. There is a formal process for that. So if you're a designer, you have a design process. And you can add biomimicry into your design process. The way the biomimicry design spiral works is if you're a designer and you've got something you want to, you've got like a design brief and you got like functions that your design is supposed to perform, you identify those functions and then you translate those functions into things that make sense to the natural world. So if you want to make something waterproof, you could say, well, how might nature, say, repel water or shed water, or keep water off or keep water in, depending on the way you're looking at it. And then you discover how nature performs that function. And like we talked about how the lotus leaf worked or how the butterfly worked to create color. Then you abstract that, you figure out, okay, exactly how does that work? And you translate that back into the design language that makes sense for your profession. And then you emulate that in your design, and then you evaluate it against life's principles. That's how you capture the sustainability part of it. And it's a spiral because the best way to do it is you start small. You get your basic idea, you do a little bit of exploration, you go, might this work? And how does this look against life's principles? And you go round and round and round. And this way you can be really innovative and try a whole bunch of different things really quickly before you commit to a radical design solution. So sometimes I work with people to use biomimicry just for creating radical design solutions in a low risk and fast and really fun way. And the other cool thing about this spiral is that there's 3 ways you can use it. One is the way I just described, that if you've got a design brief, you've got functions you want to accomplish, you start at the identify stage. Another way is if you're spending time in nature, or heck, even in your kitchen, you go, well, how did this, how does this work? Why is this rough? Why is this smooth? Why is it rough on one side and smooth on the other? Why is it this? So you discover really cool things in nature. And then you could say, well, how does it work? What functions is that performing? And how can I invent something based on that, that strategy? And that's actually how Velcro was invented. Then the other way that, that you can use is you take your existing design, whatever it is, and you can evaluate it against life's principles. And then based on what emerges, you can use that to identify new functions and then go around the spiral that way. So it's really versatile. Regardless of where you are, you can jump in, and it's an amazing way to come up with innovative and sustainable design solutions. So I want to revisit the question that we had at the beginning: why design from nature? And hopefully you're starting to see what that's about. And we talked about this idea that we design from nature because the way we do things is not supportive of life, including our own life. And we're in this mess and we need other tools and solutions to get us out of it. But on the more positive side, nature's design solutions, and this could be your design solutions, are multifunctional. Nature doesn't design for one function. Almost everything you see is multifunctional. It's also fully integrated. Like when we design things, if you have one function, you have one thing. If you want another function, you add on to it. Another function, you get this ridiculous thing that, you know, like a car, 90% of the energy moves that we use in our cars goes to move the car. Like what we want to do is move ourselves, but instead we have this behemoth of a design, you know. But nature's designs are fully integrated. They're systems based, so they're very clever. They don't even need to perform most of the functions themselves because they integrate into the system, let the system perform functions for them. They're dynamically optimized, so they're resilient. They're always figuring out how you can do what you want to do when you want to do it without striving for the biggest or the smallest or the maximum or the minimum. And of course, nature's solutions are totally sustainable. Nature has defined sustainability for us. And as I mentioned, if your solutions emulate nature's solutions, they're going to be radically innovative, which is what we need for sustainability. And also, nature's solutions and your design solutions can be beautiful. And of course, if you're in the fashion industry, you want to have something that's beautiful. But if you're a designer, and even as a person, you know that deeper meaning of beauty. When you sense beauty, when you feel beautiful, you know that it's because something is beautiful. It's wonderful in a much deeper way than just aesthetics. There's somebody that I who's not alive anymore, but he is just amazing, is Buckminster Fuller. Maybe some of you have heard of him. He's the inventor of so many things and kind of like the original modern biomimicry person. He's brilliant. He's done these amazing designs. Look him up sometime. But he said, when I'm working on a problem, I never think about beauty. I only think about how to solve the problem. But when I have finished, if the solution is not beautiful, I know it's wrong. And I know all of you feel the same way. You know when you've done something right and it's beautiful. And that's exactly what you end up with when you design based on nature. Okay, I want to keep it short today, so we have time for questions, and I can always go back to other slides if you've got specific questions that you want to ask.
I think we need to reconnect because in like 2 minutes. Thank you so much, Denise, and I think in the root of all our problems is that we forgot we are nature and we are all related among us, between us, and with the earth. And I think that this world we invented through profit and capitalism, although brought us many good opportunities and tools, at the same time, the main failure is we forgot the limits of nature. We forgot the roots where we come from, and everything is there. And if we begin working with the earth, with the environment, with its law, and we begin being in this way much more connected with us, we really have another opportunity for a better society and for another total welfare of humanity and biodiversity. Mm-hmm. And I think now we are having a good message from nature, no? So, well, I would like all to reconnect and to make the questions in the next session, yes?
Okay.
Thank you.